So tell me, would you rather retire on a yacht in Sentosa or in a Walmart parking lot RV in Arizona? Because apparently America thinks financial freedom means microwaving frozen burritos inside a camper van while your 401k burns in the next stock market crash. Meanwhile, Singapore invented this magical thing called the CPF, Central Provident Fund. Oh yes, it sounds boring, like a government filing cabinet full of Excel spreadsheets. But here's the twist. It's basically a forced savings account that actually works. Imagine Uncle Sam telling you, save your money or else. Americans would riot. Singaporeans? They just shrug, obey, and somehow end up owning condos. And here's the kicker. While the US government begs you to gamble your retirement on Wall Street, Singapore locks your money away like a stubborn Asian parent saying, no, you cannot touch this until you're 65, and even then, only for something sensible. Stick around, because in the next chapters, we're going to compare exactly why CPF makes Americans look like financial clowns juggling fire in a retirement circus. Let's start with the American dream, because apparently nothing says dream like working until you die. In the US, they tell you the 401k is your ticket to freedom. Invest early. Compound interest will make you rich, they said. Sure, if you start saving at 22, never lose a job, never get sick, and never have student debt, car loans, or kids who eat. But here's the punchline. The average American retiree today has less than $90,000 saved. That's not retirement. That's an extended camping trip with arthritis. Meanwhile, the same country that worships freedom gives you freedom to starve and freedom to go bankrupt from medical bills. Because in America, even your final years come with subscription fees. The US system relies on this mythical idea that people are financially disciplined. Spoiler, they're not. Americans get a raise and immediately upgrade to a Tesla they can't afford. Then they open Instagram and think, maybe I should invest in crypto instead of a pension. By 60, they're Googling cheap places to retire with Wi-Fi and end up in Mexico, hoping their 401k outlives them. Now compare that to Singapore, where the CPF doesn't trust your financial discipline for even 1 second. The government literally confiscates your future spending money and says, you'll thank us later. And guess what? They're right. Because 70-year-old Singaporeans aren't asking their kids for rent money. They're collecting interest like quiet millionaires. So when Americans say, we want smaller government, Singaporeans just smile politely, sitting in their HDB flat, sipping kopi, and watching the US debate whether Social Security will still exist in 2035. Here's the secret Singapore figured out decades ago. Humans are terrible with money. If you give people freedom over their finances, they'll spend it on Starbucks, sneakers, and crypto coins shaped like dogs. So Singapore didn't give them freedom. It gave them discipline, wrapped in bureaucracy, sprinkled with Asian guilt. The Central Provident Fund, or CPF, isn't just a savings plan. It's the national babysitter for your wallet. Every month, the government automatically snatches a chunk of your salary before you even see it, and puts it into different piggy banks: housing, healthcare, and retirement. No choice, no excuses, no, I'll save next month. In America, this would cause riots. People would call it socialism, government control, or the end of freedom. Meanwhile, in Singapore, people just go, okay, law, because they know the moment you give freedom to buy a condo at 25, they'll go bankrupt at 26. This compulsory system is genius because it's not about trusting citizens, it's about saving them from themselves. It's like your mum saying, no, you can't eat ice cream before dinner. Except now she's the government, and your ice cream is your entire paycheck. And the beauty, it works. Singaporeans retire with actual assets, fully paid apartments, healthcare funds, and investments that compound silently. Meanwhile, Americans proudly announce, I manage my own 401k, then panic when the S&P drops 5%. CPF's real brilliance isn't the math, it's behavioral economics disguised as culture. It assumes people will always choose instant gratification over delayed security, and designs a system that forces the opposite. It's a country that treats financial planning not as a choice, but as a moral duty. In other words, Singapore took the chaos of capitalism and turned it into Excel spreadsheet zen. That's not just smart, that's Confucian capitalism at its finest. Here's the irony. While Wall Street screams freedom and innovation, Singapore quietly beat them at their own game by doing the one thing Americans hate the most: cooperating. See, Wall Street runs on chaos, every investor for themselves, hedge funds eating smaller investors, and financial advisors who earn more when you lose. Singapore looked at that circus and said, no thanks, lah. Instead, they created a system where everyone saves together, invests together, and retires together. It's like socialism, but it makes money. The CPF doesn't just sit in a vault, it gets reinvested into national development, infrastructure, and sovereign wealth funds like GIC and Temasek Holdings. Translation: while Americans YOLO their 401k into GameStop and regret it later, Singaporeans' retirement money is quietly buying airports, data centers, and half of London. That's the secret sauce: collective investing. You don't need to outsmart the market when your government literally owns the market. Temasek is like your Asian aunt who doesn't gamble but somehow owns half the neighborhood. She never brags, she just collects rent. Meanwhile, the American system glorifies the idea that you're the CEO of your retirement. Cute idea, until your portfolio crashes and you realize you're also the janitor, because the 401k doesn't protect you, it blames you. Lost money, should have diversified. Inflation, should have bought gold. Recession, should have worked harder. It's capitalism's most brilliant scam, turning systemic failure into personal guilt. Singapore said, nah, we'll handle it. They pulled everyone's money, invested it like a national hedge fund, and made ordinary citizens silent shareholders in the country's success. So while Americans are busy arguing over freedom versus socialism, Singaporeans are earning dividends from both sides. That's not luck, that's institutional intelligence. Because in Singapore, the government doesn't just tell you to save, it invests your future like it owns the planet. You know what's funny? Most Singaporeans don't even realize they're rich. They complain about expensive bubble tea, rising COE, and how life's so hard while sitting in an HDB flat worth nearly $1 million. Congratulations, you're a millionaire who still thinks kaya toast is a luxury breakfast. The CPF system turned the entire nation into stealth asset holders. Every month, a chunk of your salary sneaks into your CPF, compounds quietly, and boom, one day you wake up at 55 with more digits in your balance than you ever expected. You didn't trade, didn't speculate, didn't even understand what compound interest means. You just existed in a country that forced you to be responsible. In the US, people brag about becoming self-made millionaires. In Singapore, people become system-made millionaires. Not because they hustled, but because the government hustled for them. Think about it. The average Singaporean owns an HDB apartment, CPF savings, and insurance, all funded by the same invisible system. That means while Americans are renting until death, many Singaporeans die owning something. It's the only place where being boring actually makes you rich. Of course, they'll still complain, I cannot withdraw my CPF until so old. Yes, because if you could, you'd blow it on a Tesla, an iPhone 17 Pro Ultra, and a Bali trip with your entire secondary school clique. Singapore's genius is that it saves you from your future self. While the American retiree prays the Dow Jones doesn't collapse, the Singaporean retiree prays the coffee shop still sells $1.20 coffee. It's a different kind of anxiety, one backed by a seven-figure safety net. So no, Singaporeans didn't beat capitalism, they just domesticated it. They trained money to sit, stay, and roll over, like a well-behaved poodle named CPF. If Singapore has a national religion, it's discipline. If America has one, it's freedom, even when that freedom leads straight off a financial cliff. Americans love to say, "You can't tell me what to do." And Singapore replies, "Okay, but don't cry when you can't afford a coffin." This is the cultural core of the CPF versus 401k divide. The US system was built on ego, this romantic idea that every citizen is a mini entrepreneur, a rugged individual carving destiny with a stock app and motivational podcast. Singapore quietly said, "That's adorable," and built an economy on collective obedience instead. See, freedom sounds heroic until you realize most people use it to make terrible decisions. Freedom to overspend, freedom to buy a $7 latte, freedom to invest in meme coins named after extinct animals. And when it all crashes, they scream, "The system is broken." No, the system gave you rope. You just hung yourself with it. Discipline, on the other hand, is unsexy but undefeated. Singaporeans don't need motivation. They have deduction slips. Your CPF doesn't care about your feelings, it cares about your future. That's why in Singapore, people don't retire with GoFundMe pages. They retire with paid flats and quiet smugness. Meanwhile, Americans insist that forced savings are un-American. Yes, because being broke apparently is American. The same people who distrust government programs happily trust Robinhood notifications at 2 a.m. It's not capitalism, it's chaos with branding. The truth is simple. Freedom without structure becomes self-destruction, and discipline, when institutionalized, becomes national wealth. That's why the CPF keeps compounding, while the 401k keeps apologizing. One believes in cooperation, the other believes in ego, and ego doesn't pay compound interest. Every country wants to be innovative like Silicon Valley, but maybe the real innovation is not going bankrupt. Singapore quietly proved that the world doesn't need more financial freedom. It needs financial parenting, the kind that tells you, "No, you can't buy a new car until you finish paying for the old one." Let's be honest. Most nations treat citizens like adults until payday, then realize they're toddlers with credit cards. That's why Singapore doesn't even bother pretending. It built a system that says, "You are financially irresponsible. We accept this. So we'll handle your retirement for you." And instead of rebelling, Singaporeans said, "Thank you, mommy government." That's the global lesson. Nanny states work when the nanny has a PhD in economics. While Western nations debate whether to raise retirement ages, Singapore just keeps compounding quietly in the background, like an Excel sheet with divine power. Even the Nordic countries, famous for their social safety nets, envy the CPF's efficiency. Singapore doesn't waste time with committees or referendums. It just deducts the money and invests it better than you ever could. That's not dictatorship. That's design. If the rest of the world copied this model, global poverty would shrink, debt bubbles would burst slower, and fewer people would believe TikTok traders promising 1,000% returns. But here's the problem. Most countries can't, because enforcing discipline requires trust, and trust requires competence. Singapore has both. Most governments have neither. So the CPF isn't just a financial system, it's a personality test for nations. If your country can't handle collective responsibility, you don't deserve collective prosperity. It's that simple. In a world drowning in financial chaos, Singapore is that one kid in class who actually did the homework and now owns the school. So what did we learn today? That Americans get freedom and Singaporeans get results. One retires with slogans, the other retires with property titles. The 401k is like a Tinder date. Fun at first, unpredictable later, and you still end up broke. The CPF is a marriage, strict, stable, and quietly builds equity while you complain about rules. It's funny, really. The same Americans who laugh at Singapore's nanny state also Google cheap dental care in Thailand when their insurance fails. Meanwhile, Singaporeans grumble about CPF cannot withdraw now, while sipping Starbucks in a condo their CPF literally paid for. Freedom sounds beautiful on paper, but in reality, freedom is the right to make stupid financial decisions, and discipline is the privilege to survive them. Singapore chose the second option, so the next time someone says CPF is too controlling, just ask them, would you rather be free or funded? Because here's the truth, freedom doesn't build wealth, structure does. And in a world obsessed with individualism, Singapore quietly proved that collective intelligence beats individual arrogance every single time. So maybe it's time for the West to stop mocking Singapore's strict system and start asking how a tiny island of 5 million managed to outsave, outlive, and outsmart the entire capitalist world. If you had to choose freedom with risk or discipline with comfort, which would you take? And be honest, could your country survive a CPF-style system